The world is headed into uncharted territory, and America is leading the way. Losing our religion, America becoming pagan as Christianity cedes to the culture. Well, what will happen in a world that doesn't have a religion? It's actually not happened on any widespread time zone. There's nowhere you can go in time where you can see that people have given up their religion. One of the arguments that's available today is that people that consider themselves to be a-religious, as in without religion, actually aren't. They're just worshiping different things that haven't been considered religious icons before. And if you consider the word worship, worship obviously means to give great amount of praise and thanks to something. Well, people are always full of worship. The question is, what are they worshiping? Are they worshiping their TV? Are they worshiping their smartphone? Are they worshiping their spouse? Are they worshiping porn? I mean, there's lots of different things that people worship that they can't stop thinking about, that they can't stop being thankful for, and things of that nature. So when we discuss the situation of not having a religion, you've got to expand that beyond a Jesus religion, a Muhammad religion, a Buddha religion. Human beings don't exist without some type of connection of worship. And what about faith? How does faith differ than worship? Well, obviously, worship is how you give thanks and you can't stop thinking about it. Whereas faith is you're expecting to get something back. Let's use the examples we did before. What about the faith in TV? Well, not including the last season of Game of Thrones, it brought you satisfaction. What about the smartphone? Well, it must give some satisfaction since as you look around you, you will discover you are in a world of drones now. The amount of times that you can look around yourself and see people not peering into a smartphone, that number is getting smaller and smaller by the day. And if you're watching this on a smartphone, people looking at you, they can't even count you as looking away because you're partaking in this video. Thank you very much, by the way. And then porn. What does porn give you? Definitely not the thing that the last season of Game of Thrones gave you, even though some would say you were kind of screwed by that episode. Okay, we move on. So let's look at the numbers here. Never before in American history and the U.S. Has it ever been so tested without having religion in its forefront. Forget about the background, the actual forefront. Cultural distractions abound and church attendance is dropping, and faith leaders mired in scandal are struggling to figure out how to connect to the next generation of potential churchgoers. Later on in this article, it's going to do the finger pointing at what are the distractions. And one of them is kind of funny because it hits a little close to home for what I do. Let's see. People of faith are still a majority, with more than 75% of the country ascribing to some religion. All combined, Christianity counts for nearly 63% of the population. I wish it would have put in where that falls historically, because I'm pretty sure that's a very, very low number for this country. Even though this country's always been divided by, you go back to the Pilgrims. You had the Pilgrims on the Mayflower, and then you had the strangers on the Mayflower. We've never stopped participating in that bifurcation, where there's always been this side of the railroad tracks is for the Christian folks, and that side of the railroad tracks is for the cowboys and the prostitutes and the saloons. So that is the American way since the beginning. We've always had that battle. That's, we just came off of Christmas and it's like, oh, it's too secular. Oh, it's too Christian. That battle has been there since the beginning. That is what makes America America, is we've always had that divide. But the uncharted territory is, what if the religious side, the Christian side, what happens when it vanishes? And again, the world hasn't even faced that question of not having a dominant religion for a people. Not the whole planet, but for a people. Okay, so let's see. We go down here and we see, for the first time ever this year, the nuns, as they call them. It's like, I think that name's already been used by the Catholics, but they're spelling it different. The nuns are the largest demographic in the U.S., with 23.1% of the population, overtaking Catholics and the evangelicals. Among those ages 18 to 22, the vanguard of Generation Z, more than 40% belong to nuns, as in they have no religious affiliation at all. According to his numbers, which are based on the General Social Survey, a massive trove of sociological data. In other words, Google has it. In Hollywood, Christianity is portrayed somewhere between a comedy and a disease, though some other faiths fare better. In the States, the blue laws, those are the religious laws, like you can't have stores open on Sunday, you can't sell alcohol, blah, blah. All those things that tie in with religion are called blue laws. In the States, blue laws have been wiped away, delivering Sunday from God over to the NFL, shopping, and youth sports. In the nation's courtrooms, centuries of doctrinal Christian belief, which underpinned the nation's laws, are being challenged by a smaller group of politically powerful BLT GQ community. Yes, they are. All of which prompts the question, will religion wither in 2020? Or perhaps it prompts the statement, religion will wither in 2020. Well, 2020's hindsight. And let's see, shepherds seeking flocks. I find what's hardest is there's no shared foundation anymore, said the Reverend Keith. Religion isn't even in the cultural air and water that used to be breathed and drank by everyone. When he says that I find it hardest that there's no shared foundation anymore, it's not just religion. The actual American culture has been dying, not uniquely to America, but we're speaking of America right now, with the loss of, no, let me reverse that. With the increase of, as they said in this article, I hear them. They're coming. They heard my speech. It's the Google police. Okay, so where do we leave off? Oh yeah, we were going to talk about TV in the 70s. So from TV's inception all the way through the 80s, there were only a few channels, and there was cable was introduced in the mid-70s and didn't really catch on as a phenomenon until the 80s. And so that meant there were only a few channels. And so VCRs weren't even introduced to the public at a reasonable price until 1978. So when TV shows were on, and the big shows in those days were Happy Days, Starsky and Hutch, Laverne and Shirley, and when people watched them, they watched them together as a time zone and as a nation, so that the next morning go, hey, what did you think of this? What did you think of that? The only thing we have left in American culture that allows us to do that, because our music is so subdivided now, we don't even have radio stations anymore. Now we have streaming. So the only thing we have that unifies us now as a culture is cinema, and that's dying. But when Rise of Skywalker came out, or Captain Marvel, or Endgame, again, these are the titles everybody knows. But if I started naming TV shows that everybody knows, it gets a lot harder to do, because we don't share that. Cinema is the last church of America where we all come together. And who knows how much longer that's going to last, because even though they're etching on another record year of income, the income is not based on butts and seats. The income is based on insanely high ticket prices. Because if you compare it to butts and seats, it goes back almost 30 years of attendance. Okay, so I find what's hardest is there is no shared foundation anymore. And he's stating the religious part. And that's true. I remember when I was in school, in university, and I'm in a graduate class, and there were people in that class that were in a graduate class that had never heard of Adam and Eve. They didn't know who they were. To be in a university and to not understand culturally who Adam and Eve are, you have no business being that far along in your education without somebody saying, you need to read this and know this. You can't go and look at anything from Western civilization from the year 700 up with any kind of understanding if you don't know what is in the text of the Bible, because everything is a reference to the Bible from the year 700 until about 1970, The touchstones are just everywhere, and you won't know. You are reading hieroglyphics at that point. You're like, I recognize that that's a person standing in a way, but I don't know what it means. If you don't know what's in the Bible and you're trying to understand what's happening, you're going to get none of the jokes from so many things. You're not going to know any of the expressions because so many of them come from the Bible, and the ones that don't come from Shakespeare. Coincidence that they were written at the same time? The Bible wasn't written at the time Shakespeare was. The King James Version was. There are obvious signs that for centuries the Bible was the one cultural continuum, as we just discussed. Now the culture is fragmented with TV epics and HBO or Netflix. I use cinema as the example, and more likely to be a source of shared knowledge. This isn't just an issue for people of faith, it's also an ignorance of the canon of Western culture, which again, we just addressed, so we'll move on. For decades, churches counted on a cycle where teens would go off to college, cut their attendance, or perhaps stop going altogether, but then drift back when they grew older, got married, and had children. Well, one of that, okay, and that's not happening anymore. Now they just don't come back. It's because a lot of them never had babies because the Obama economy was just devastating to the birth rate in America. The Public Religion Research Institute said that the nuns, again, N-O-N-E-S, in the U.S. are growing at a stunning rate. In 2010, they accounted for 18%, but by 2012, they were 20%, and have grown at 1% each year as of 2018. 26% of Americans had no affiliation. That is a staggeringly quick growth rate. Christianity worldwide will hold static, if the projections are correct, at about 31.4% from 2010 to 2050. That is a huge projection into the future. We're talking 30 years out. Pew says, as in the Pew Research Group, says Hindus will maintain their numbers and Buddhist and folk religions will decline slightly. But Pew says the unaffiliated will drop from 16% down to 13%. Why? Because guess who's going to get them? The big growth globally is projected to be in the Muslim population, and they will rise from 23.2% to 29.7%, nearly reaching the number of Christians. Well, that's going to be an interesting world if they don't have a reformation. If they do have a reformation, who knows what it's going to look like, but if they don't, oh my. Sharia for everybody. The shrinkage is staggering. In 1976, the mainline Protestants made up 30% of the country. Now they're 10%. In a decade, they'll be 5%, according to Burge. Even if you don't go into his future projection, the idea that it's dropped 20% from 76 to 2019, wow, that's a whopper. The polarization that has affected our politics has seeped into our religion. Moderate religion has been disappearing, according to Burge. See, now this is where you can start picking at him. It's like, what do you mean the polarization is in the politics from religion? Religion means how you practice things. So for those who think that their religion isn't their politics, it could be argued quite strongly you're not doing your religion correctly. If you're living one way for your religion and another way for your politics, pretty sure most religions aren't on board for that, whether you choose to do it or not. Culturally, we're very much in a place that's post-Christian. And again, that goes back to the fact that the media is not doing it. There are no positive droppings of religion in movies, in TV shows like there used to be. From the inception of TV and even cinema, there were always examples in countless movies of how religion would direct people one way or the other, even if it was just the trusty priest in the background or the trusty pastor, whatever. I mean, even our Christmas songs, the one with that the snowman is going to be married by Parson Brown. I mean, it was, and that's in the songs. So it was in all of our culture, as in you could find it in all of our culture. It's not in every example, but the examples were plenty. Culturally, we're very much in a place that's post-Christian, and one of the signs is that our religion is not as important to the identity. Only 37% actually mentioned that when they said, hey, tell us what you are, You can use any examples you want, and only 37% put Christianity in there. Now, I would say this. There's a possibility that some people just consider it such a deep part of their fiber that it's not worth mentioning. It's like, dare I say, in the year 2019, as we get ready to slip into 2020, that you wouldn't mention that you're a boy or a girl because it's like, well, duh, this, as Thomas Jefferson would say, that's a little on the self-evident side. And, there are those who feel the same way about religion. It's like, do I need to mention that I'm a Jew, that I'm a Christian, that I'm a Muslim? I mean, that's just kind of a given. But it didn't come out of their mouths, so there you go. In the past, a congregant would show up on Sunday morning for services and maybe also come for a Wednesday Bible study and pray at the tabernacle in a Catholic church or take part in a diocesan sports league. New churches are lucky to have them for Sunday service. But how many churches even offer that stuff anymore? That's an interesting question as well. Meanwhile, those who start out without a religion don't often turn to it. About 2/3 of those who grew up in homes without a religious affiliation stay unaffiliated. And again, I would suggest that that has a lot to do with the fact of what was mentioned earlier, that religion's not in the cultural air. There's nothing to guide them there in any shape or form. If you don't have some kind of message, the reason that people run ads for their businesses is to let them know, hello, we're here. We really want you to come by, and we're here. And I think it's funny that TV stations, which can run commercials all day long because they're TV stations, even they use billboards. TV stations even use bus stop signs. Even TV stations advertise outside of their domain to let people know they exist. And if Christianity isn't being name dropped in our songs anymore, and in our movies anymore, and in our TV shows anymore, how are people supposed to know? You have to beat people over the head with the message several times just to even get them to notice it. So says all the advertising. Oh, now's where they get into the finger pointing. Kids sports and the myriad of activities that schools are offering for kids. Oh, that's pulling people away from God and Christianity. And media choices are things like that. That's the competition for a church. And vying for people's time and attention, it begins to start a spiral of less time, less relationships, less knowledge, he said. That's right. Your kid playing basketball, soccer, or volleyball, that's the reason that they don't know jack about Jesus. It also puts a lot of pressure on churches to do more, provide the basics of faith as well as deepen the ties of community. In the 1 hour a week, they still have the congregation's attention. Now, I think that particular sentence is very telling of at least one of the reasons that Christianity is suffering the fate that it is. It also puts a lot of pressure on churches to do more, provide the basics of faith as well as deepen the ties of the community. The idea that the ties of the community were let go, that has a lot to do with the fact that if you're not out there being a part, then you're not out there being a part. If you're not hitting them over the head with all that advertising saying, hey, we're great because we do this. Hey, this is what religion can do for you. The old adage of it, what's in it for me? You better have a freaking answer for it. If you're telling people you want them to give up their soul to hang out with you, and religions are asking that you give up your soul to hang out with them, you better have something pleasant to offer in return. And whatever that pleasantness is, apparently only the Muslims are out there banging people over the head with it successfully. Still, it's not that they're rejecting God. Of the younger Americans who stepped away from their church, only 10 to 15% actually rejected the belief in God. It's difficult to study science and not come to a conclusion that there's a higher being. The Big Bang Theory, okay, well, what made the Big Bang? What's on the other side of the universe? And on and on and on. You kind of need a creator. You really do. And let's go back to the opening of this, which is, there aren't examples in humanity where humans weren't worshiping something. It's in our DNA. We worship something. So his advice to those attempting to reach out to the nuns, don't lead with the hot button issues that have dogged the church. That's not to say you don't bring them into that eventually, or that you surrender the church's teachings on those things. But I think we're at a cultural moment where there are even bigger issues. If you read in the holy books, all of them tell you how to do the reach out. And they all list examples of how they did the reach out. Why are those being ignored? Every one of them has instructions on how to do it. And clearly, minus the Muslims, those methods are being ignored. Okay, so this was a really long video, but it's a very deep subject. And we tried to stick to the numbers in this and not too much of, everybody who listens to this or reads this article or whatever the case may be, they all have their own deep held feelings about which direction and whys and all that stuff. And we tried to stay out of that on this particular one. And with that said, if you did like this video and you want to hear more like it, not typically as long, and usually with a little bit more humor injected, you're welcome. Please check us out. Do share the video if you found it important, or you think that this would be helpful to somebody else to say, hey, what do you think that everybody doesn't know jack about Jesus and nobody knows anything about Muhammad? And the list goes on. And just to see the numbers are really, wow. Anyways, we'd love to have you here checking us out and helping the channel grow. And other than that, we wish you a very happy New Year as we get ready to cruise into 2020.